Just so you know, I wrote like 7 pages worth of notes.
Ooh. Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
But owning a red carpet puts me at ease.
Welcome back, everybody, to What a Concept, a little show that we have on the channel where we do a deep dive into some great concept records. And this is going to be a fun one for us because this is an album that I'm not all that familiar with, but I've got a great guest with me. A good friend of the channel, Dan, is with us. Hello, Dan.
Hello. Thank you for having me again. Always a pleasure to
Oh,
talk to you, to chat.
absolutely. Yeah, you've been on the channel, I think, twice before for our kind of like tier lists, but
Yeah.
we're breaking out of the mold this time and we're doing a deep dive into a concept record, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the leprous and between the buried and me ones.
I was trying to remember the other one. I remembered the leprous one, and yes, you're right. It's the Between the Buried and Me. But today, do you want to introduce the album? What album are we talking about today?
Sure. So we're going to be talking about Wake by a band called Hail the Sun. Hail the Sun is they're usually put under two categories, actually
Hmm.
more like three categories.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like
yeah.
post-hardcore,
Mhm.
progressive metal, and a third one that I recently heard about called Swancore.
Swancore. I'm vaguely familiar with Swancore. When I hear Swancore, I immediately think of the band Swans and
Yeah.
their later outputs like To Be Kind and The Glowing Man and those types of things. And I don't know if I would attribute that to this. So am I
No.
mistaken in that? Does Swancore have a different meaning?
So I had that same assumption too, but then it turns out that where it comes from is the guitarist Will Swan
That's right.
from Dance
Okay.
Gavin Dance.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, okay. That makes more sense because that would include some of the other bands that kind of have this sound because there's I want to preface this right up at the front and that like the post-hardcore scene and I guess the swancore for lack of a better term
Yeah, yeah.
is a style and a genre that I'm not all that taken with, like it's a little bit of a jagged pill that I have, and it's similar for bands like Coheed and Cambria and
Mm.
some of those other kind of like bands, hardcore bands that like to flirt with progressive rock with concept albums and the noodling guitars. And I always figured that I don't know, there's something that like there's a kernel that I enjoy more within the theatrical stuff that a lot of the emo bands from like the mid 2000s like My Chemical Romance and
My
Fall Out
Chem,
Boy
yeah.
and those kinds of bands that I can enjoy in that context. But the moment that they're removed from that context, I'm not all that much of a fan of. But I just want to preface that in case anybody's wondering, like, why is Notes not enjoying this as much as everybody else is? It's like I just want to put that kind of right at the forefront for people. So why this album? Why did you pick this one? I only know that this is their sophomore record.
Mhm.
And it was released 10 years ago in
Yes.
2014.
It
Um,
actually just celebrated, yeah, its 10-year anniversary, which they
yeah.
did a tour for. And I got to saw
Oh,
them live, and they actually played the album start to finish
wow.
live,
I love when a
which
band does
was,
that.
yeah, it's actually where I got this shirt
There you
from
go.
that tour.
Gotta
So that was
represent.
awesome. So why
Amazing.
did I pick?
Amazing. Why did you
So
pick this one?
yeah, so originally it's funny because you brought up Coheed. I was
Hmm.
originally thinking maybe we could do Coheed,
Hmm.
but the problem with Coheed is I've never read the comics, and then like
Yeah.
each album is like one small part of like a bigger story, and I was like, do I really want to get into the weeds of that?
Yeah,
Like,
and if we miss even the smallest little detail, they'll come for us. They'll be with pitchforks and like torches. Like, why didn't you include this little bit of information that you would only know if you read a certain comic or a certain short story that Claudio had put on a website back in like 2006? It's like,
yeah, yeah,
I don't know.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm still kind of flirting with that idea because I do think that Good Apollo, especially
Hmm.
thematically, has some stuff in it that I really think is fascinating. But regardless, the reason why I wanted to do this album was one is I don't see a lot of discussion about the album that really goes in depth about it. Like
Hmm.
I haven't really seen anyone talk about like what the album means
Hmm.
and As someone that has a deep love for this album, it's my favorite album by the band.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
I was like, let's do it. Let's give this its flowers, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So as I mentioned right up at the top, I'm not very familiar with this. So in this band's discography, is this like a significant album? I know that it's your favorite from the band, but is it like a fan favorite? Is like, is this kind of like the big darling album for them?
From my understanding, yeah, it is actually like more than just being a fan favorite. It's actually considered a rather significant album within the post-hardcore scene. Like
Okay.
it's it's like considered pretty special
Okay.
for, now I listened to it like way after the fact, so I'm not
Hmm.
like super privy exactly to like what it meant to the scene at the time. I'm also
Hmm.
like you, like I don't listen to a ton of post-hardcore. I do like the genre, and there are some bands I really like.
Hmm.
Shout out to Stolas, they're really good. Before we talk about this one though, I had asked you to listen to two songs
Yes.
from their EP. I don't know if you got around to that.
I did when you first asked me to, but that was like back in August. So it's kind
That's
of
fair.
gone from my mind, unfortunately.
So I guess before we get into that though, did you like the album? Because I was a little concerned because you had, like you said, you were unfamiliar. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
there are moments from this album that I do enjoy. I
Okay.
can appreciate the musicianship. Yes, I don't think that this would be like one that I would return to all that often. As I mentioned, it has that kernel of that style of the post-core, the post-hardcore stuff that I'm not a big fan of. I still enjoyed my time with it. Like it wasn't
Good.
like some of those
Good.
records where I was running to the stereo to turn it off or dreading anytime that I was listening to it. But I think I would return to some of these types of bands that play with this style of music first, like Reign of Kendo or
Mhm.
Kairos or even like the Deer Hunter or even Cambria and Coheed probably first before I'd come to this one. It was still a good time. It was still, I don't think I loved it as much as you did, you know, but I still had a good time
Fair.
with it. Yeah.
Well, hopefully through talking about it,
Hmm.
maybe it'll deepen your appreciation a little bit.
That's what I
Um,
love doing these things for. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm hoping for that. Could you walk us through then perhaps the concept? Like what is the concept here? Is it a narrative story or is it just kind of like a concept that the band is playing with? Like what kind of a concept album are we dealing with?
So it's not a narrative. So it's not like Metropolis,
Yeah.
it's not like we're following a protagonist and we're going through a story. It is a thematic concept album that is, there are recurring ideas throughout
Hmm.
the album and that it's tackling. So
Hmm.
uh, I think one big theme of the album is dealing with death.
Hmm.
That is like a constant thing throughout almost like every song. Um, I think a couple of other like major themes of the album are existentialism.
Hmm.
Sometimes it dabbles with religion, which I think religion and existentialism kind of go together.
Yeah.
Um, but but largely, I also think the album is about the idea of finality, like the idea
Hmm.
that something has to come to an end.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, when I was listening to this, the one of the lyrics that really stood out to me, and it was something that was repeated throughout, was this concept of like, why are we here? Like, what was our genesis? How did we get here? And the one thing that I appreciate of this album is that it never really makes a definitive answer of that. It's just kind of
Yes.
like we don't know, and it's the thought of this that is more interesting. Like the question itself is more interesting than any kind of answer would yield. I really enjoy when a band asks these questions without providing a definitive answer, because being a big prog fan that I am, I get inundated with those with bands like B from Pain of Salvation or anything that Neil Morse does. Like Neil Morse is like, well, God done it, so there we go, we're done, right?
Yeah.
you know
I
so I
I love
appreciate the
Similitude of a Dream. That's a
yeah.
great album.
Yeah,
But like, yeah, like the whole
yeah,
thing is just about Jesus. And it's like,
yeah. And it's like, okay, well, that's cool, but like, you're also stopping some really interesting thought experiments and philosophical thoughts. So I
wasn't there a
appreciate.
lyric where he literally says the devil is talking such smack?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yep, yep. The devil's talking such smack. Yep, that's pretty much. It's pretty much it, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yep.
appreciate that this band really plays with a lot of those concepts. And, I have a very interesting relationship when it comes to the thoughts of death and whatnot. And so I like how this band presents a lot of those ideas. Doesn't necessarily, as I mentioned, provide the definitive answers or even attempts to, but just finds it more interesting to play with those questions. So
Yes,
that
absolutely. I
I
agree.
thought that was a lot of fun, and the music pairs very well with that because a lot of that is not the most easy of concepts, right? So they're like, well, if we're asking these really complex and convoluted questions, we're going to provide the music to do so. So,
No, I totally agree. So the reason why I'd ask you to listen to those two tracks from their EP is because that EP,
mhm,
Elephantitis, came out just before Wake, a couple of years
mhm,
before.
mhm,
And, that EP has um, multiple different songs about different things,
mhm,
but I thought it was really interesting that Dead Messages and the other song, Will They Blame Me If You Go Disappearing?
mhm,
Those two songs in particular were about death in a way that the
mhm,
other songs weren't, right? Like there's one song about fuckboys
mhm,
and how they
mhm,
suck. There's one about a toxic relationship. There's one about drug abuse. So I found it really fascinating that because it's a short EP, it's only like a few tracks, but
mhm,
Donovan made sure that two tracks in particular was about death.
mhm.
So, real quick, since I name dropped him,
Mhm.
Donovan Milero is the both the vocalist and the drummer,
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
and the song is his baby. I mean, the band is his baby essentially.
Right,
Like,
right.
you know, he is a really fascinating individual. When I saw him live and I saw him behind the kit and like singing at the same time, I was just like, that's so good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's definitely pulling a Phil Collins in that sense.
Dead Messages is like it's a song about it's kind of how it sounds. It's about
Mhm,
someone passing away and you had something to say to them and you didn't get a chance to,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
And it's one of my favorite songs by the band because I think it's so beautiful and it's also very powerful. Like it starts so slow and serene, and then like it kind of hits you with the aggression, kind of like it's like your life is peaceful, and then all of a sudden your life is in turmoil when that person, passes on.
yeah.
And then it ends peacefully again. And then when
Mhm,
it does that, it then switches the question to about whether that the protagonist whether they said everything they wanted to say before they passed on,
mhm, mhm, mhm.
which is
Okay.
a really, really like evocative thing because like normally we think about, the people around us that might be going.
Yeah.
Usually we don't think about when we go. Like
Yeah.
usually we leave that for like the end of our lives, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's those kinds of thoughts are not ones that like I normally think of. So like to
Mhm,
hear that in the song, I was just like, oh man, he's right.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, those are some pretty heavy things, and it connects almost perfectly within this album itself.
And Will They Blame Me If You Go Disappearing? That one's just about like the protagonist is like pissed off with the guy
Right.
and he's thinking about killing him and he doesn't it's kind of ambiguous whether he goes along with it or not. But like the main
Mhm,
point of bringing up these songs is
mhm,
because like it's like Donovan was already thinking about these concepts before Wake and it's like they kind of grew from this EP and they became Wake, like
mhm,
where the whole
mhm.
album was like, let's dig deeper into these ideas, let's dig deeper into these concepts.
Right, right. And it definitely flows very well within there. Um, so I know we touched a little bit about the music, but let's talk about the music itself and how it kind of reinforces the concepts and the themes here. So I already mentioned a little bit. Was there anything on your end that you felt, really helped with the concept and how it plays with the concept?
The album in general, I think, has a lot of aggression to it, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I think there's also a lot of beauty in the album. The very first track, for example, Rolling Out the Red Carpet, it starts off like very kind of moody, and then it starts to ramp up a bit, and then it kind of like ends, softly again. like because again, the themes are finality, existentialism, religion,
Hmm.
death. I feel like these are all things that we deal with in those kinds of extremes in a way. It's like it never feels like these concepts are like, oh, whatever. These are not concepts that you deal with passively.
Hmm.
It's either like a moment where it's like it's kind of like all consuming and it's like it's kind of taking things over, or it feels like really distant. And I think
Yeah.
like the music really complements that.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like it's funny because I know that we already mentioned My Chemical Romance, but it does feel as if they took the Black Parade from My Chemical Romance and then just like really dug a lot deeper into it. Like instead of doing like the Black Parade is much more of like a musical almost, and I feel like
Yeah,
this is much more of like a really existential, like I don't know, post French expressionistic play, kind of in that sense,
kind of.
like I feel like if Andrew Lloyd Webber did the My Chemical Romance, the Black Parade, this is much more of a Sondheim where it's just like, no, we're really gonna dig deep into there. So like I feel like the music here is much sharper. It's a lot more um like almost to the point in that sense. The musicianship is outstanding, and I was just hoping for, I think one of the things I struggle with this particular style is there's a lot of noodling. There's a lot of going from passage to passage to passage, but
Hmm.
there's not like that catchy chorus. There's not that immediacy. This is one that you really do have to like spend a lot of time with. And if you can spend that time with it, then it does reward you. But it doesn't have like those very inviting, very friendly choruses or licks or those moments that I'm like, oh, I want to go back to that record in a sense that also plays with the concept and the things that we're talking about because it's not all that inviting. Like these are
Yeah,
difficult things to talk about. These are difficult things to think about. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it does work thematically, almost a little bit to its detriment, like just a little bit, right? Because like I wouldn't want to run back to this record because of that, unfortunately.
Maybe I'm just a weirdo because I run back to it all the time.
Oh, I know a lot of people do, right? Like I was trying to when I was, we were talking about not having a lot of information about this album online. There were like I found two or three forums dedicated specifically to this record and, people talking about it and people connecting with it. So I can see the connection that's found on there. But, it doesn't have a dedicated Wikipedia page specifically for this record or, a metal archive kind of summary about this record, even though there are, you know, asterisks and, things talking about it. So,
Mhm.
yeah, those who
No, that's
like it
true.
a lot, you know.
For sure. And
Hmm.
to your point about like immediacy, though, like
Hmm.
I will say this, especially in terms of the lyricism, I feel like what makes the lyricism on this album really fascinating is that I feel like it's a combination of both very direct lyrics and also very abstract lyrics. So
Okay,
here's
yes.
here's a here's what I think is a good example. So on the first track. It's the very first two lines you hear are, I fantasize about open wounds, allotting time just to dream them through.
Hmm.
So I think that first line is pretty straightforward. I fantasize about open wounds. Okay, we got a sicko. That's like, that's like, yeah, he's like
Yeah.
thinking about like open wounds.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
weird. But then the second one, allotting time just to dream them through. Now it's like,
Hmm. Hmm.
wait, what does that mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of a Canadian band that has the line, oh, what is it? You pinch yourself just to make sure that you're awake, or you bleed just to make sure that you're still awake. Um,
Mm, that's an
and it
interesting lyric.
is, yeah, so it is kind of like allowing your time to heal, allowing your time to recover. Yeah, there's a lot that you can kind of distill from that because, when you work out, you are essentially doing damage to your body, and then the next day you recover and recover stronger.
Mhm, mhm.
So it could also be a metaphor for that. Like we go through these pretty intense moments just to come back stronger afterwards. Yeah, I didn't even take the time to really think about those first couple of lines.
Yeah, so the first track, called "Rolling Out the Red Carpet."
Yeah.
Is the song is basically about, at least the way that I interpret it, it's about a
Hmm.
murderer because
Okay.
that's why they have a red carpet. They like it's easy to hide the blood stains with the red
Sure.
carpet.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why they're talking about bleaching the bathtub or whatever.
Hmm.
So like
Hmm.
this is, I feel like the album kind of like hitting you in the face right away. It's like this
Yep.
album's about like some morbid stuff, okay?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know immediately whether or not you want to spend more time with this record after that.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this too because like obviously prog is our bread and butter.
Yeah.
It's my favorite genre. And
Yeah.
like I do feel like a lot of prog lyrics, and I say this lovingly,
Hmm.
can be very abstract to its detriment. Like, you can't just say that your protagonist is sad. You have to
Yeah.
say that
Yeah.
the tears of the moon fall in the crystalline kingdom and languish in the night.
Yeah, the capital P in Prague doesn't stand for Prague, it stands for pretension. So yeah, that's one of the things that I love and also am not a big fan of with Prague. Like I love how pretentious and how flowery it is, but sometimes it's like, come
Yeah.
on, guys, that could literally mean anything.
Again, that's what I really like about the lyricism on this
Hmm.
album. I think because they kind of lure you into like a false sense of like understanding with like the
Hmm.
more straightforward lyrics, only to present you with the more abstract ones later.
Hmm.
And then,
Hmm.
you have this like really interesting kind of like tug and go with the
Hmm.
lyricism that I
Yeah.
really appreciate.
All right, let's talk about because I've already outlined a couple negatives that I had with this record. Do you personally have anything that you find is negative about this that doesn't work, that maybe the concept gets lost in the sauce? Anything on the negative sides of this record?
I think if I had to like, I don't know, because I really love this. It's literally one of my favorite albums of all time. The literal only thing I guess I can think of is that like maybe I think Mist Injection is probably like my least favorite track.
Hmm.
Even then, I don't think it's like a bad track, but like I think it just gets lost
Sure.
within the other tracks because like especially coming off of like Disappearing Syndrome, Relaxed Divide, I think those are just like, much stronger tracks. Right afterwards is Hanging Revelation. It
Hmm.
just gets a little lost. But like thematically speaking, I think it's a really strong album. Like
Okay,
I think it
okay.
knows exactly what it wants to say, and I think each song contributes to that.
Hmm.
I guess Mist Injection is the only one where it doesn't like quite hit the mark. So that song is more about like a drug addicted couple.
Hmm.
And like
Hmm.
so like technically no one dies in the song or anything like that. It's more like the implication of that
Hmm.
like, well, you can overdose on drugs. And it's also implying that like the relationship can end,
Hmm.
because like the relationship between this toxic drug addicted couple is the drugs, right? Like,
Yeah.
and once the drugs run out, then the relationship is gone. So it's like it's
Hmm.
putting a like a time limit basically.
Yeah, and actually one thing that you have pointed out is like the runtime. One thing that I will praise this album for is how well it uses its time. Like it's 12 songs across 52 minutes, and I feel like if it was any longer, I would probably start to tap out, but I think
Hmm.
it's a really good length for the album that it's presenting. We talk about concepts all the time on this little show, and how many
Hmm.
times have I said like this album didn't need to be a double album, or they talk way too long.
Astonishing.
Yeah, yeah, right. So like I'm glad that they didn't try to do a double album on this one. I'm glad that they didn't push it over an hour.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
fine being 52 minutes.
I don't think it's a hot take to say that Astonishing would be a better album if it was one disc. I'm just
I
saying.
think a lot of people hold that opinion. Um, yeah, yeah.
Because I think
Um,
it has some bangers. And being honest, like
oh,
every time I go back to it, I'm like, I find a new song that I like, and I'm like, it's not that bad of an album.
mhm.
It's just kind of long, and I
Yep,
don't want to sit
yep,
through 2 hours.
yeah, yeah. That is the definition of getting lost in the sauce. Yeah, yeah. One of these days we'll tackle the astonishing. We'll tackle the astonishing and really dive into it because I agree that like I like it more than I think a lot of people do. but yeah, it doesn't need to be as long as it was.
No, yeah.
Um,
Like,
so
no, I totally agree.
yeah. So let's end this with the platinum album concept test. If you've
Okay,
seen the show
okay.
before, this is where we run the album through 5 questions. And it's a simple yes or a no question, and simple in that it's a single answer, but as we have seen before, it can get pretty heated, and it's not as simple as
Okay.
it seems. Depending on how many of these things it's passed, denotes what type of an album it is. So 0 out of 5 is a trash record. A 1 out of 5 is a tin record. 2 out of 5 is bronze. 3 out of 5 is silver. 4 out of 5 is gold. 5 out of 5, completing all 5 is a platinum record. Yeah, let's run this through.
Okay.
Usually there's a little
Okay.
bit of a discussion. I usually give leniency to the guest. Um, but yeah, we'll see how we go. So the first
Okay, cool.
question, they generally tend to get a little bit harder as they go through. But the first one's pretty easy, and that is the concept original? Are we working with an original concept for this record?
Um, I mean, I feel like death is something that like a lot of people have written about. So
Hmm.
I can't really say that the the concept itself is wholly original, but I will say that the execution of it is because
Mm,
it's kind of like an anthology album of sorts, where every song is dealing with a different protagonist, and each
hmm
protagonist is dealing with the themes in different ways. Since it's all dealing with like the similar topics, it's going really deep into these topics. And I feel like it fleshes them out in ways that you just don't normally hear on an album. So I feel like maybe not the most original ideas in and of themselves. Like we've all heard songs about
hmm
these ideas, but like I don't think we've heard them in this way before.
Okay, so you're starting to win me over because I was going to put this one as a hard no, only because I feel like we've mentioned it before, but like the Black Parade basically did this whole thing before, and other concept albums have dealt with death,
Hmm.
and we're looking more at like the horror rockers, like Rob Zombie does a bunch, Marilyn Manson, and even like Alice Cooper did a couple of them all about death. I think your explanation of the way that they do it is kind of original, but I don't know, I'm still leaning towards no. But
That's
I
fair.
can, how are we feeling with giving this one like a no, but an asterisk? Like
That's fine with me. That's fine
yeah,
with
it's
me.
it's a no, but it's got a little asterisk of like the album itself might not necessarily be um like the concept might not be original, but the way that they produce it is original. So
For sure.
unfortunately, that's still 0 for 1. But I think this second one it will pass pretty regularly, and that is, does the music reinforce the themes of this concept?
I definitely think it does. Like even just like the song Jane Doe, like that song is about a woman as like she's being murdered and she's become a ghost. And
Mhm.
it like it has this like ethereal nature to it. It's like a very soft, beautiful sounding song, and it's about the sadness of this poor woman's passing. And you really feel for that person. There's another song, Falling on Deaf Ears,
Mhm.
um, which is about questioning faith. And
Mhm.
like it feels like this back and forth because like when you question your faith, that's how it feels like, right? Like on one hand, like you might be really upset, and then or then you might come to peace with the idea, or something else happens, and then maybe it brings all those emotions back, and you don't know how. It's a very conflicting process, and the song
Mhm.
reflects that process. I mean, I could keep going. I could keep going. I feel
No, but
like yeah,
I fully agree. I fully agree. I think this album really reinforces the themes through the music. If this album were instrumental, I would still, pick up on some of the themes and some of the ideas that the band is putting forth. So for me, this one gets a very easy pass. This one gets the check mark. So that so far brings us 1 for 2. So it
cool,
has moved
cool.
out of the trash bin. getting into the
Yeah, it's
tin
not
territory.
trash.
It's not trash. No, no. So this brings us to a third question. This is where a lot of concept albums specifically kind of start to trip over their feet, and that is it accessible to the casual listener? Can somebody off the street that has never heard the band before sit down and listen to it?
So I think they can. I mean,
Okay, okay.
obviously you would need to be a fan of this type of music, but like
Mhm.
because each song is like I said, like an anthology, like they're all following different protagonists. You could take each song, remove it from the album, and you could just enjoy it as its own song. Their
Okay.
biggest song of all time is "Relax Divide," and
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
song is about a married couple going through a divorce. You
Hmm.
don't need to know that the what the rest of the album is about to just appreciate that song in isolation. And again, I could say the same
Okay.
for pretty much every track.
I didn't think about it that way, and you are quite right. In like, yeah, the songs in isolation work really well, and then the songs in context of the record also work really well. But I think for me, this album unfortunately fails only because if I think about five randos, I can't see 5 out of 5 or even 4 or 3 out of 5 wanting to listen to this record based on the concept of this record because it is very, very heavy.
Sure.
It is quite dark. And it's
It's
not
also a
even
really aggressive album, save
it
for
is.
save for like a couple of songs, but like a
Yeah.
lot of the album is like Donovan yelling and screaming and like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
questioning God, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, like if we want to bring back the poster child of the Black Parade, like I would for the concept and the themes, I could say like the Black Parade would satisfy 4 out of 5 people, whereas this one might satisfy 2 out of 5. In terms of
Sure, I can see that.
how they're dealing with the concept, how they're playing with the concept, and also the music that's found on here. Like as I mentioned at the top of the episode here, like the music isn't friendly to new listeners. It's unless you are a fan of the post-hardcore scene, the Swan core, as we were talking about. I think people might struggle with this one. So that's
Well, I
why.
mean, yeah, that I think that's partly why Relax Divide is one of their bigger
Hmm.
songs because it is such a
Hmm.
soft song. Even though it is about divorce, it is still like it is very soft, it's very melodic, it's very serene. So,
Hmm.
it is
Hmm.
it is easier for people to swallow. But like unless you're already into post-hardcore, or if you're not in the mood for something that's dealing with such heavy topics, I
Hmm.
it's not very accessible. I can agree with that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just that first line that you brought up, I was just like, "Ooh, that's going to turn away quite a bit of people." So, but you're also
Yeah.
weeding, like you're getting the cream of the crop, right? Like those who will like this record will love this record. So, yeah,
Yes.
unfortunately for me it fails, unfortunately, so that brings it for 1 of 3. Luckily, looking ahead at these last 2 questions, I think it passes fairly quickly and fairly
Okay.
easily. The fourth question is the music solid from start to finish? Are there any dips in quality or any duds in the track listing? And I know that you had mentioned um
Yeah, missed
the
injection.
missed injection, but even then, like I would agree that it's not a bad song. It's actually quite a good song. So,
Yeah,
like,
I only
you know,
pointed it out just because I feel like compared to the rest of the songs on the album, I just
mhm,
don't think it quite measures up. But like it's still a good song. Like I'm
mhm.
never like, oh, let me skip this one. Like I'm still jamming to it. So
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
one thing I really like about this album is I understand that like maybe for some like the aggression is difficult to take,
Mhm,
but for me, I love the pacing of the album because at least
mhm,
for me, it knows when to be aggressive, but then it knows when to pump the brakes, slow things down. And when it does, to me, it always sounds beautiful. Like I
mhm.
mentioned Jane Doe. I think that's
Yeah.
such a gorgeous song. It's so haunting and it has this atmosphere to it.
Mhm,
And then
mhm.
and then afterwards, it hits you back with the aggression with Anti-Eulogy, which is like a real banger. So like I
Yeah.
think for me, yes, it clears. It is great from start to finish. I love every track.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree. I agree. Even though I'm not a big fan, I think the solidness, like the consistency of this album is very on point. So yeah, this one gets a very easy pass. That brings it to 2 out of 4. So that moves it up to bronze. Let's see if we
Yay.
can give it the silver. And I think it can. I think it can.
Okay.
Because I
Okay.
already touched upon this. Is the album the perfect length? Is it too long or too short?
I gotta agree with you. Yeah, I think it is the
Hmm.
perfect length. And I mentioned
Hmm.
before with that, I think it's very well paced. I don't
Hmm.
think it feels its length, at least not for me. Like when I finish the album, it doesn't feel like I sat down and listened to 50 minutes worth of music. It for me, it kind of just flows by because it's so engaging and it never feels like there's a dull moment, you know? So it to me the length is just right. Like it's all killer, no filler. You know, it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like it nothing feels unfinished and nothing feels bloated.
Yeah, I fully agree. Like as I was mentioning, like 50, what did I keep saying? 52, 53 minutes?
Something like that.
52 minutes. Perfect length for this. I don't think it's too short. Like when I end this album, I'm never like, oh, I wish it was just a little, like a couple more tracks long. But I'm also not like, oh man, like that was way too long. Like they
Hmm.
could have shaved off something. I think you're quite right in like all bangers, no fillers. Like it was a perfect length for the album that they're going for within this one. That gives us another really easy pass, bringing us to a silver medal.
I'm happy
Uh,
with that.
three out of
That's
five.
good.
3 out of 5. We get our final rating, and that brings us to the end of our episode. Dan, was there
Cool.
anything you wanted to touch upon before we bring the viewer back to their own areas?
I just hope that if anybody is watching this and they've never heard the band before, I know that a lot of this was like the topics were super heavy, talking about like death and questioning religion and like and all that. I understand, but like if if that like intrigued you, I hope watching this, you go like, maybe I'll give the album a chance.
Mhm.
That's all I'm hoping out of this is that people who hadn't heard of the band before, who haven't heard this album before, that this inspired them to give it a shot because this is a very special album to me. Uh, I dearly love this album. I'm hoping that, through this other people can see what I see in it. Why it's so special to me. And actually like just going through the process of like thinking about it more critically for the sake of this helped
Mhm.
me appreciate the album even more. So, I think this whole process for me was a lot of fun, and I'm glad that we were able to do this together.
Absolutely. And I love the process. I thank you for introducing me to this record and this band. And I think we're going to end it there because I think you summarized it great.
Thank you.
Dan, where can people find you if they want to keep checking out your stuff?
So I'm on YouTube. My YouTube channel is Daniel Santos. Unfortunately, if you just type in Daniel Santos, you'll find a like Puerto Rican singer. So
It's all right. I've
uh,
left the link down below so you don't even have to go looking for it. So
awesome,
you can find it in
awesome.
the description there. Yeah, love your videos, love your
Thank
in-depth
you.
analyses. So analyses,
And
um,
now Sai.
analysi. Um, so I've left
Yeah,
that down below so you can give them a follow.
thank you.
And yeah,
Yeah, I'm
thanks.
currently working on a video on Silent Hill 2, so
Ooh,
yeah,
okay,
I'm in the weeds of
amazing.
that one right now.
Ooh, I'm excited to check that one out. And thank you all for watching. Thanks again, Dan, for coming on.
Thank
And
you for having me.
we still haven't figured out a good way to end this all off. So I think we'll catch you in the next one and just keep listening to some good music out there.